Hello, everybody. Welcome to Narativ Live's coverage of Pam Bondi testifying in front of the Epstein inquiry on Capitol Hill. Joined today by Ellie Leonard, the panicked writer. Ellie, it's always nice to see you. How are you?
It is great to see you. Happy Friday.
It is indeed a happy Friday, a busy Friday as well. Let me just make sure that we're streaming. Are we streaming on your page? Did you manage to say?
I think so.
Okay,
I think
awesome.
So, yeah.
It's nice to have you here on this really auspicious day in some ways, because what we're seeing in this, behind these walls and behind that door is what we're told. We can't actually see it, right? We will never get to see the testimony of Pam Bondi in front of the committee, and only Democrats and one Republican chairman are present as Pam Bondi is supposedly telling the truth about Jeffrey Epstein and the cover-up of Jeffrey Epstein. Only the truth of it is she's obstructing, she's not answering questions, and she's joined there by a Department of Justice official, even though she's no longer the Attorney General, who's basically minding her, making sure that she answers everything the way they want her to answer things. She's blaming Todd Blanche for everything. And of course, Todd Blanche is the former presidential defense attorney in real life. She's been obstructing. She's not been answering questions. And we'll play you clips in just a minute of how the Democratic representatives who were inside there grilling her responded when they took a break. But I wanted to get your thoughts as we head into this, Ellie. Like you've seen the news about what's been reported today. This is what we expected in many ways, but it's still hard to take.
I just think it's the new trend. It's the Howard Lutnick special. It's the we refuse to be recorded. We refuse to be, you just lose so much of an interview when you don't see someone actually giving it. And in his case, it was the body language, the sweat, the reactions, the tone of his voice that matters so much in how we perceive the answers that he gave. And so the idea that they're doing the same for her is, it's a slap in the face to the survivors. I don't expect her to say anything substantive or anything that would necessarily say that she had done anything wrong. I know the survivors are not thrilled with this. So it looks like they're coming out. One thing that I just read on Kate Justice's Substack that she had said, Melanie Stansbury had just come out and made a statement that was pretty strong a minute ago. But one of the things she said was that there were 6 million files. And so I don't know if that is a full determination of the number, but that is definitely more than we have. That's another 2.5 million missing files. That's significant if that's the case.
I have that clip. Let's take a listen to that. This is Representative Stansbury from New Mexico describing what she heard from the AG, the former AG, inside that hearing room about the missing pages of Epstein files.
End by saying this could all end now. The administration could end this by releasing the 3 million files they still have. In fact, Pam Bondi confirmed that they had 6 million files in their possession and have only released 3 million. She said that today. They could end this now by investigating crimes of known perpetrators that we have seen in the files. They could end this now by turning the Epstein files into Epstein trials. And they could end this now by actually speaking with survivors. And Pam Bondi herself said today that she had never spoken to a single survivor.
That is a stunning admission, isn't it? That she's never spoken to a survivor. We remember her in her last hearing, a public hearing. She wouldn't even look and face them. And then there's this, what you point out there, 3 million additional files that we have not had. And there's a lot in the files we do have that's quite damning.
Right.
Very
and then
damning.
Why wouldn't we have those other 3 million?
Yeah.
What holds those back? But also just the fact that along the way, we think of last July, they released a statement from the FBI saying there was no co-conspirator list. We've had multiple memoranda coming from the DOJ saying that this case is effectively over. There are no more files. We're not missing anything. And so for her to say that there are 3 million more files, then you have to go back and say, well, did you perjure yourself prior to this? Did you say something prior to this that we can now say on the record was a lie? And what does that mean? And where does that stand?
Well, because this isn't just about the files. This is about the cover-up. This is also, this is what we've heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, is that Pam Bondi was directed by the President of the United States to execute a cover-up of these files, that the instructions came from Donald Trump. That he asked her in the way that he does these things to not hurt some of the friends that he had or something like that in Mar-a-Lago, or that's why he wanted it done that way. And so for her to not answer any questions about Donald Trump today is almost a confession in itself. It's almost saying out loud, hey, I did actually have instructions from the president to cover this up, and I refuse to answer them because I will perjure myself. I will also, incriminate the president, neither of which are very attractive options for someone who's been, in the Donald Trump universe for a very, very long time. Yet the survivors that were there today, had a very different message as well. They weren't only concerned about the cover-up; they were concerned about the fact that their names had been released, that they had been doxxed, and that the perpetrators of these crimes have been protected. I mean, it's exactly the opposite of what you'd expect. The victims and survivors being re-victimized, re-traumatized by having to go through this in the public space like this, while the perpetrators are anonymously hidden behind redactions.
Right. And the Epstein Files Transparency Act is a very, very simple act. It's a very simple document. It is 1 page long. And if you read through it, it is very clear that they are not to redact anyone based on their political persuasion, their government office, their reputation. That is illegal according to this act that they themselves signed. We now know that that's basically the only thing that's redacted in this files. They did a very poor job of redacting the girls' names, and a lot of independent journalists and people came forward when these files were first released in January and said, look, I am finding driver's licenses. I am finding yearbook photos. I am finding people's social security numbers and passport scans of these girls. They are not redacted by any means, but we also have identifying information that we would not want for ourselves to be public. Like their social security numbers shouldn't be in the files for the entire world to see. And so there were a lot of people who were digging through these files that reported them to the DOJ, and they had to be pulled. They're still not great. I mean, you go through the files, and anytime they redact somebody, you can usually figure out who it is based on multiple clues, either around the redaction, or they just don't redact them the whole way through the paragraph. They redact them 3/4 of the way, and then at the end they leave them in there. So it's a very weird system. They redact pronouns. They redact Jeffrey Epstein's name. They redact when we think of the torture email and Sultan bin Salam, or no, Sultan. Am I saying that right? Yeah, Sultan Salam. He is a specific person that, according to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, should not be redacted in that email, because that is a reputational redaction, and he is a global, financier. So that specifically in the act should not be redacted, and it is.
And there's so many other names that are actually, they may have been ineffective in redacting all the survivors. They've been effective in redacting all the others. I mean, in the perpetrators.
Bannon is very carefully redacted.
Yeah. And so even though we've got hints of Donald Trump along the way here, and already there are quite a few very serious allegations against Donald Trump in the files we have, we're missing obviously a lot more. There is, in our independent investigations, the ones I've done here at Narativ and you've done and elsewhere, it's clear that there's a lot more. There's a lot more between Howard Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein. There's a lot more between Howard Lutnick and Donald Trump that we don't know yet. And yet none of that has surfaced. In fact, you just published a piece today on Lutnick. So do you want to tell people about that piece and what you're finding?
So it's based on, he had his deposition, a couple weeks ago. And again, it was not recorded. We weren't able to get the video deposition like we were with so many other people in this case so far. And so in it, he goes through and he kind of says his usual narratives of the story when he met Epstein and how he was so grossed out with his wife and they left immediately and he never hung out again, except for we have the Epstein files. We have instances of them hanging out. And if you are so grossed out by a person who you think has sexual propensities and, a massage room in the middle of his dining room, why then 6 years later would you take your children to stay at his island? And everything is so like, oh, it was meaningless. Oh, I was bored. Oh, I didn't care that I didn't go inside.
It's a long way to go, isn't it? You just happen to be in the neighborhood.
Or just to say, this is the years that I lived next door to him, but I had no idea. I'd never heard that he was a sexual offender. And then you can just Google how many New York headlines there were about Jeffrey Epstein and his court case, and the fact that he supposedly would have been missing for 13 months next door. And he had such high traffic going in and out of his house. So if that, potentially stopped for 13 months, that would have been noticeable. But he claims not to have known any of it. He's out of it. And we have them, going into business with Adfin and purchasing millions of dollars worth of stock shares at Adfin. And then we have Epstein donating to Lutnick's causes in his name. There's so much crossover. And something in these files that I would notice and I would note is, I get that it is, it's early on maybe in the internet, but we've had consistent email. Anybody was emailing from the late 90s fairly consistency. Like that became the mode that we communicated with people. And you will notice in the files that there are almost no emails prior to 2008. They just don't exist. That is not because of technology. That is a specific point in time when they stopped posting all these emails. So that is his time in prison, and anybody who would have emailed him in prison or in jail. That is all the Trump interactions and correspondence that would have happened prior to like 2004, 2005. That is all of that. It doesn't exist in the files very specifically, and there would have been many emails at that time.
I didn't even know that, by the way.
Yeah,
and yet, as you're saying it, I'm thinking, well, if they were executing the 2008 crash, of course they would be taking out those emails. Well, that is really telling. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
The other thing which people need, and this is a great article people should read. It's on the Panicked Writer, Ellie Leonard's fantastic Substack, and it goes through the whole history behind Howard Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein. But I always like to remind people, and this is a great, the red arrow really points it out, how close they lived to each other. These guys were neighbors for a long period of time, and they had a lot to do with each other just simply because they must have seen each other on a regular basis, but they were also in the same business together. They operated in the same line of work. It seems so unlikely to me that Epstein and Lutnick wouldn't have had a lot to say to each other on a regular basis.
Well, when you move in a multi-billionaire next door to Jeffrey Epstein, the likelihood of him not being tempted to go into business or represent him financially is very, very slim. He was too tempted by that kind of thing. So I would highly doubt that they had no more financial dealings than what we can see. I'm assuming there are many more.
Well, let's also remember that it was Epstein who sold him the house, really, through a bunch of very complicated, other holdings for $10 officially. I know there was more money that traded hands, and both of these properties were ultimately owned by Wexner.
By Leslie Wexner. Mm-hmm.
So you've got, that's not just coincidence, people. That doesn't just happen. That's coordinated transactions that you would only do with people who you would assume aren't going to rat on you because there's tax evasion and a whole bunch of other things going on.
There's also the idea that Wexner outfitted all of his properties with cameras because he was very paranoid. And so when you have this podcast that was last year that Lutnick did with the New York Post, it was called Pod Force One, and he says all these things in it that he has later recanted as just speculation. He's talking about them filming everybody, and he's saying that the films were likely used as trade in the Sweetheart deal, and Epstein was the biggest blackmailer in the world. Well, the reason he would know that is because Wexner owned his house too, and Wexner outfitted every property he owned with cameras in all the rooms. That was very common. The apartments on 66th Street, same thing. And so that is why he would know that. He wouldn't have known about the cameras in any other way other than they were the same property owned by the same person.
So you've listened to that entire podcast?
Most of it, yeah. I've read all the transcripts.
It's great. I'm glad you did. Anything else jump out at you? Because I haven't. I know that. But anything else really jump out at you?
Well, okay. So just the idea that he only met Ghislaine Maxwell one time, which is probably unlikely as well. She was very the history of Cantor Fitzgerald is that they lost the most people in the World Trade Center. So they lost a third of their employees in the World Trade Center, including Letnick's brother. Letnick was dropping off his kid at kindergarten that day, so that's why he was not at work. And so he says he only met Ghislaine Maxwell once, but we have evidence to show that Sarah Ferguson, when Cantor Fitzgerald moved into a new building, that she actually had an office upstairs from Letnick that was for her charity that was called Children in Crisis, I believe. And that Ghislaine Maxwell would have worked hand in hand with that charity. And so she would have been one floor up in this building that was totally owned or leased by Cantor Fitzgerald. And then we also have Ghislaine Maxwell at these events that are raising money for Cantor Fitzgerald, as a result of the 9/11 thing. So the chance that he only met her the one time is probably pretty unlikely as well. Yeah.
Pretty unlikely, especially because she was so close to the royal family and he's so close to the royal family. There's also those 302s that show up in all the Epstein files, which are insiders, former employees of Cantor Fitzgerald, which allege that, not only was he involved in Russian money laundering, that, he collaborated with Jeffrey Epstein on the 2008 crash and other things, but also that they stole money from these charities, the very charities that were started for the employees of Cantor Fitzgerald that were lost, and Fergie's charity, and then they also threw these Dolce Vita parties. Do you know much about those charity events, the Dolce Vita events?
I know that they were in England and they raised, hundreds of thousands of dollars supposedly for Cantor Fitzgerald. I really feel like there was, and I can't guarantee this, but I feel like there was a little bit of something sketchy with the use of that story and the money being raised for Cantor Fitzgerald and then what moved forward from that. But they were lavish events. They were these only found on Getty Images events, and they were just wine and dine and then raise money for these different companies and entities. And
her charity, Fergie's charity, was for children, right? If they were taking money out of those charities,
all those there, that's kind of a through line with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and you think of like Terramar and all these, the Florida Science Foundation, all these things that they set up. They never really raised money for anybody, and if you look at their finances, they spent more money than they actually raised, which means that they weren't actually using the money that they raised in the proper manner. So, it's kind of like how everybody had an LLC, for a modeling company. Everybody had a charitable foundation that wasn't actually raising any money for charity.
I'm always struck by the fact that there's so much of the story, right? There's the abuse of the girls, then there's the human trafficking, the blackmailing, then there's the manipulation of markets, then there's the manipulation of world events, and then there's also the how can one even say this? It's just there is this sort of like omnipotence feeling that these guys really ruled the world. Like they felt like they ruled the world and they could do whatever they wanted to with complete, I don't know how it got to this point, but where they would feel emboldened enough to contact Vladimir Putin to talk about rebuilding the business banking sector of the entire world and introducing things like cryptocurrency. We're talking about forces that are massive. These are not, this is not a criminal spree.
Yeah. It was not like calling up the queen and going through all the lines of communication being like, Your Majesty. It was a bro culture within Russia, China, all these modeling agencies and everybody that Bannon connected, the Saudis, like they could get on the phone and be like, yo, dude, what's up? And then like, let's make a plan. It was a very weird, if you read their emails, like they weren't professional. They were not, they weren't intimidated by anybody else. Like Epstein was not intimidated by a world leader. The world leader was not intimidated by Epstein. Like they were just all buddies and they hung out and they ate dinners together and they shared secrets together. And so for somebody to call up and be like, I need this, they'd be like, all right, it wasn't a big deal. And going back to like, how do we get to the point where people just don't feel bad and they can just do these illegal things? It's, on a very small microcosm scale. You think of like a celebrity getting pulled over for speeding and then saying something stupid like, don't you know who I am? Like, it's that idea of I've made it to this far. Nothing can touch me anymore. And that's I think, how
But they
felt.
did. They also protected each other. I mean, at the end of the day, they had people in law enforcement around the world, in law enforcement in America, in every city police department. It's how Jeffrey Epstein got away with it the first time.
Right.
And so, it wasn't just like hey, we think we're more important than everybody else, or we think we're going to get protected.
Right.
They actually got protected because there were so many corrupt officials that would take the money and do whatever, whatever they wanted. Really, I mean, it's appalling. It's appalling, but it's
paying,
really.
I mean, when he was on work release, he was paying people from the jail to work as his security at his office, right? And then they got rid of all the sign-in sheets, so nobody knows who came and went. Like he literally was paying for the police department to work for him. Like it's on the record. So and then you have to think like
just back out. Let's see where we're at here, because I think they just come back out, and we may have missed some of this.
Okay.
Let's see where we're at here.
Apparently, lawyer at the time made an allegation call.
Is this right?
Tried to kill Epstein and sent ASC redacted the 302. Task 2, take these names and build out new spreadsheet along the drug on them. It just says drug.
I remember this email.
Trump, Weinstein, Prince Andrew, Glenn Dubin, Jess Staley, Leon Black, Les Wexner, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Howard Lutnick, Ponzi scheme and money laundering, Alexander Guest, Jean-Luc Brunel, William Barr for being present when a girl was raped. This is the FBI to the FBI. What is the FBI and the DOJ? What are they doing? Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that one.
What is this? Is this this is not live? Is it live or is?
My sisters, we have.
I don't think this is live.
I think it might not be live, so I'm sorry if I misled everyone there because
And
it's.
on that website, we have a timeline of Epstein's crimes that we.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull it back because I'm not sure we know exactly what we're watching yet, but I'm gonna figure that out quickly. So what's your I guess we're not seeing.
I remember hearing that email.
Okay, yes, you've heard this before.
I'm trying to find it. Yeah. So it's I'm trying to think what it is. It's an FBI email. So it's FBI correspondence between agents, and they've just spoken with, I think, Nicholas Tartaglione.
Yes.
And they were talking about getting the derog, meaning derogatory information, which people have debated that, but looking that up, that's usually what derog means in FBI.
It is live. It is live. I think it's.
Oh, is it? Okay. Then why don't we go back? I'll see if I can find that.
So bizarre that it's out of sync here. So. She's just. Let me see what this was earlier on today. That's exactly what happened. Okay, so it's live, but earlier on from today, they're just replaying it there. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we didn't miss anything yet. So this is about the suicide, alleged suicide, which is such a big topic.
Yes.
It's worthwhile. Let's just play some more of this press conference when they did come out. The reps, what they said at the start of this conference, I think is worth. Unless you want to finish with that thought, do you want to finish?
No, I'm just sending you the actual email that they are talking about.
Okay, great. Oh, so amazing.
This is what we continue, and especially when we ask questions of what the president directed her to do. So the DOJ is in there right now, stopping questions about President Trump and about what happened in the release of these files and why so many survivors were doxxed and their information, of course, released to the public. And let me also just say, finally, before I turn this over to Liz, to Ms. Stein here, we asked questions about Ghislaine Maxwell and the transfer. And again, she referred those questions to Todd Blanche in the Bureau of Prisons. So let's be clear, we have many questions for Mr. Blanche and for the Bureau of Prisons that yet Republicans are refusing to ask. Why was she transferred to a less secure facility? And Ms. Bondi claims to have no knowledge of the actual transfer, no knowledge that it was a less secure prison, and didn't know about it until she found out after the fact, and then will refuse to answer additional questions. So let me.
I find that amazing. Isn't that amazing? I just and we'll play Survivor Stein in just a second, but the Attorney General knows about these things. Of course, she knows about these things. She's also the head of the Bureau of Prisons. That's her job. For her not to know that this important witness is being and criminal is being moved to a low security prison is such a ridiculous notion. It's such a lie. It's such a blatant lie by her.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's got the audacity to do that in front of this committee is appalling.
Well, it's good that she's perjuring herself then, because last time she was just talking about gas prices. So at least she's either committed to convicting someone or lying, and then we can run with it.
Yeah, I don't know if she's perjuring, because someone just pointed out as well, she's not under oath here. I'm not sure if she was under oath or not, but but I do want to play you this. I thought Stansbury was pretty amazing today in her. She was very forthright, and probably of all the speakers, it was quite remarkable. So let's listen to her and then some of this at least, and see what she had to say.
From having to testify under oath pursuant to a congressional subpoena. Now, let me explain a few things about what we have seen in the room. First and foremost, if Pam Bondi was complying with a congressional deposition to testify under oath, Department of Justice attorneys would not be intervening and essentially trying to stop her from answering basic questions about her conversations with Donald Trump, with the administration, and trying to claim that she does not have to answer questions. In fact, as the ranking member said, she has been asked multiple times about the Trump administration, about her conversations with the president, about her conversations with other administration officials. And when asked specifically about a conversation with Donald Trump, one of the Department of Justice attorneys intervened and said that she did not have to answer the question because it was a voluntary interview, and said, in fact, quote, "We don't even have to assert privilege because of that," and said, quote, "We refuse to provide answers." That means that the United States Department of Justice is intervening on behalf of Pam Bondi to stop her from answering questions about what happened in the cover-up of this case and her conversations with Donald Trump, and is asserting that she does not have to answer questions because she is not required to, because she is not being deposed under oath. This is a cover-up. This will be remembered as the largest cover-up likely in American history, and it is clear that this interview is a smokescreen to try to show the American people that they are complying while they are not. Now,
I mean, that's just true. That is just true. I mean, there's nothing you can take away from today's events that you would not be, if she's not willing to answer any questions, they're not even, because it's a voluntary interview is the reason. She's lying in front of Congress. There's still a congressional inquiry. For her to go in there and really, as a public servant, to be ignoring what is a clear directive to appear there and tell the truth is just proof of a cover-up. It's just more proof of a cover-up. It's kind of astonishing, really, that we're here, but it's just that's just where we're at.
You wonder how far they're going to go with it, because at this point, there was a point when I think they felt like they could slip one past the American people, but the American people are pretty informed on this case at this point. Like even politics aside, most people know about specific instances, emails, discussions, FBI conversations, depositions. Like, they're all fairly public at this point. So to continue to say things don't exist, you have to wonder how far in their minds they think they're going to take this. Is it the assumption that we're still stupid, or is it just that they are, cat in the backwater? I don't know. No, go ahead.
I think it's the assumption that there's nothing we can do about it. I think it's not that they think that we're stupid. We know it's a cover-up. They know they're participating in a cover-up, but there's nothing we can do about it until the Department of Justice is restored, or until we take back Congress. They think that. Now, I don't know if that's really true. I think that there are many things that can be done on a state level, especially considering these crimes took place in New York, which last I checked was a blue state, and in New Mexico, which is also a blue state, where there is a lot of opportunity for attorneys general to take action, and that can be done in any state where there was a crime committed related to this group, but that could include other crimes beyond just these crimes. You know, there's money laundering crimes, there's fraud crimes, there's art laundering, you name it. There's a conspiracy here of all sorts of crimes, including the cover-up itself. And so, you know, I just have to believe that on a state level, something can be done on maybe even through the DA in Manhattan, although, you know, it's difficult because we see what they've done every time they've gone after the president or Epstein or anything like that. They've come after the prosecutors in such a quick way that, you know, they'll end up framing them for some crime on a federal level. And that's the price that these people will pay for doing their public duty. But nevertheless, it is their public duty. And I think we need to keep pressuring people inside the states' houses, in the assembly houses and elsewhere to do whatever they can to buttress these states against this federal overreach, which is really, you know, if you're entitled in every state to have criminal protection from that state. It's not just the federal government. And if the federal government is at odds with the state, then all the more so, that state should be defending you against the federal government. And there's plenty of qualified lawyers and people in those states who could take on this stuff. And I think that has to be the next level. It has to be. Otherwise,
this occurred in many, many, many states across the U.S. All these states could prosecute based on their own crimes that happened in their own states for this case.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, you know, it may be a worthwhile exercise at some point to actually see which blue states crimes did take place in. Because, you know, just even if you're transporting someone from across state lines for the purposes of human trafficking without their permission, without whatever it is, for sex trafficking or anything else, that is illegal and you can't do that. New Jersey is another state from New York.
New Jersey has Teterboro Airport.
Yeah, if you're going to Teterboro with somebody that you brought from New York, you're crossing a state line. You know, there are, not to mention foreign and elsewhere, and flying people into Zorro, same thing. I mean, there's no ways. You know, those people didn't just land up there. They flew them in there. They landed at the airports. Maybe they landed right at the ranch itself. We don't know, but because only small planes could land there. But you know, there are crimes aplenty, not to mention the secret medical facilities at Zorro and all these other things that may have happened underground. I mean, there are just too many questions and too many crimes committed in the states themselves. And I think you'd expect there to be able to be some sort of action. I think New Mexico is trying to do that. I don't know how clean this investigation is going to be, and I don't know ultimately if they'll succeed. But I did see yesterday, or was it the day before, that they are looking for people to come forward. If you're a victim or a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein in New Mexico, they really are looking to interview you. And I hope people consider that and take up that opportunity.
Yeah, they exist. I mean, we were looking at pictures this week, which I thought they were Balmoral, but I was incorrect. But like, there's pictures of redacted victims at Zorro and all. I mean, they did photo shoots out there of girls on the beds and on the porch and, you know, in lingerie. Like there are thousands of pictures in the files in these little thumbnails of people at Zorro. And you know, we have, again, in the Unknown Survivors Journal, she talks about escaping New Mexico. And, you know, this did occur. These things did occur, but it's not been talked about.
Yeah, I mean, you should probably highlight those to the New Mexico AG as well. I mean, you don't know if they've seen it or maybe they're choosing not to. What are we seeing? Are they back out? I can't tell if they're back out live because I think we're just looking at old tape now. But I want to just show you one thing. I showed this earlier on, but you know, it sort of helps keep everything in perspective here around Pam Bondi. And then we'll get back to the last clip there. But this is something years ago when I was just doing some stuff about Rudy and company, and I hadn't even heard of Pam Bondi. But I knew she was becoming a part of the story. And she was then the Attorney General in Florida. And the year is what, 2014? 14? Is that 14?
Yeah.
So, you know, on this day in 2014, there is a reception in support of Attorney General Pam Bondi with special guests Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani at Mar-a-Lago with quite a collection of people whose names I actually need to spend more time studying. Who were on the host committee. But, you know, it's not hard to imagine that someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who is very much part of the social community there, would have known Pam Bondi, would have maybe attended one of these receptions for her, would have maybe donated to her campaign, would have maybe done something here that maybe puts Pam Bondi much closer to Jeffrey Epstein. Because certainly, if she was this close to Donald Trump and being honored by Donald Trump, at $3,000 a table,
it's a club.
It's a club. It's not $3,000 per contribution. That's a lot of money for an AG.
Yeah, it's a small club full of many people. Like, it's not. Again, I posted that picture of the Yom Kippur breakfast last week that had all the people who went to this breakfast with Jeffrey Epstein in 2010. And it's so many big names. And at that point, you just know it's a club, and it's very hard for me to believe people who say, I didn't know anything about anything. Because if you're attending these events, if you're willing to pay thousands of dollars to go eat at Mar-a-Lago, like, everything about the people involved who are in charge. Like, their story, their social standing, if there's any like backstory to them, there's anything scandalous, like, you just know everything. And so again, it's this idea of like keeping secrets for this giant club of people in New York City, in Florida, in New Mexico. People don't tell secrets when they're wrapped up financially in their friends. And this is probably
and they got compromised. They got an intelligence operation stuck in there, and they got used and done, and they all got compromised. And they're holding the line for each other, and that's appalling on its face of it. But what that same group of people is now doing to America is kind of beyond reproach. And the fact that they're willing to continue this thing is just ridiculous. I did notice Brian Ballard. Who's that? I know that name from somewhere. Do you know Brian Ballard?
Brad Bondi. I don't know. Right? Ballard. I was looking for Philip Levine, but he's not on here.
Pepe something Junior, Carol Stewart. I'm going to go through this a little bit more carefully.
Sure.
Anita Mitchell's.
Search a couple of these in the
Mike Hightower is certainly a name that comes up. I've seen before. Lori Kalani.
Hightower. Isn't it like Hightower Financial?
Yeah. And I think Kitson is a well-known company. And maybe guys know, but maybe the people in the chat are watching and they know some of the stuff. Lev's former partner is there apparently. Who's that? Anyhow, it'll be interesting.
Financial anyway.
Ballard is a lobbyist in Florida, says someone. Lev knows him well. Oh yeah, that's where I know him from. That's right. He used to work for Lev used to work for Brian Ballard. That's how he knows Pam Bondi, and that's how he knows Brian Ballard. You mentioned that before. Interesting. So I want to play one last clip from The Survivor, but is there anything else you want to share? Because I know we're going to run out of time here. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about your investigations? We're going to talk a lot about Leslie Groff, who's coming up next.
Yes.
There's Leon Black is coming soon. We heard from Sarah Kellen. And I don't know if you can tell people more about what Sarah Kellen said.
Well, Sarah Kellen, I mean, we don't know a lot, and I do find it interesting that we don't have her transcript yet. Would have been helpful, being as we are now deposing or whatever Pam Bondi today. But in this discussion with Sarah Kellen, who was Epstein's assistant from 2001 to 2015, she named 3 men who helped Jeffrey Epstein procure young girls and women in probably Florida, but also New York. One of those was Philip Levine, who is the former mayor of Miami. One is Frederick Fakai, who is a hairstylist, and one is Patrick Demarchelier, who's a fashion photographer. The first 2 are frequenting the files. Patrick Demarchelier is not in there as often, but he was in the world of fashion. It's not unlikely that he would have known Epstein and been involved. But also, Philip Levine was very close with Donald Trump. That is a connection between the 2 men. He had a very close friendship with Donald Trump. So, I mean, it's interesting. I would like to see the rest of the transcript of that deposition. I've heard that it is the most substantive thus far.
Oh, really? That's probably why we haven't seen it.
Yeah,
It'll probably be edited ad nauseum as well. but that's interesting that it's so substantive. Why do you think it was? Do you think Sarah Cullen actually has a soul, or do you think?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, we know a little bit about her, and she is one of those where it is a fine line of ethics and morality. She was somebody who came to Epstein when she was 21. She had left the what is it, the Jehovah's Witnesses. She'd been shunned by her family. She was married at 17. She'd been in an abusive relationship. She had no money. She was very typical, like a girl that he would groom. She just happened to be over the age of 18. But she grew up in a life where underage sex abuse by older men was very, very common. And that is kind of her stance, was she didn't really know any better. And people believe on both sides of that, but I would like to hear what she had to say, because she stayed for 15 years, and she was one of the people who he paid for everything. But the thing, when you had these assistants who he paid for everything, he didn't actually give them a salary, other than Leslie Groff. He didn't really give them a salary. He just paid for things as needed, so they couldn't really save up and leave. So that is part of her story, is she was never able to really leave because she would have had nothing and no one and no family and nobody. And so there are a lot of like people that I look up to who do believe that she was more of a victim than a perpetrator, but I do want to hear for myself what she had to say.
Leslie Groff is a different
Leslie
person,
Groff
right?
is a different story, yeah.
It's not. She's not Sarah Cullen.
She started working for Epstein when she was 35 years old. She worked for him for 20 years. She had a full salary. She lives in a multi-million-dollar house in Connecticut now. Like she knew everything. She made every appointment. She did hair removal surgery, or like laser hair removal for the girls. Like, she knows everything. I don't consider her to be a victim. I don't even think that he ever sexualized her at all. I think she was much too old for him, quote unquote. I think she was just purely administrative for him, but she knew everything. She was not unaware of anything that happened in the house.
I'm just, reading some of the chat here about different people's. I'm not following the latest Zorro Ranch. People are asking. I'll get back into that. I don't know where to take all this. There's the. This is a lot. There's too much going on right now in that world. Yeah. And generally, you've faced it, I faced it. There's just a lot of infighting attempts to make people among us fight against each other, and people are facing that. My suggestion is to ignore it as best you can and move on. There's not much reason to engage, because when you engage, it just gives them an excuse to inflame the situation. And I'm going to make it my a concerted effort to block people who are engaging in this kind of really negative infighting and inflaming of situations that people are doing, because it's just, it's so obvious what is going on. Obviously, we're making an impact. Obviously, people are noticing what a lot of us are doing. Then they're trying to break it up. And you can see today that there is a cover-up underway. You can see that Pam Bondi is involved in a cover-up. You can see that the GOP is involved in a cover-up. Donald Trump very likely involved in a cover-up. The FBI and everybody else involved in that same cover-up. It would make sense that they would also be targeting people who are, bringing the truth to the story and exposing the truth. It just is all part of the same scheme. So, we're no longer in the old Substack. We're in the new, tougher, rougher Substack. So, be careful about what you engage with, but also just, be aware that that's happening, because it is important. I don't know if you want to say anything about that or.
I would say that just focus on eyes on the prize, and that is justice for survivors. That is why I'm here. That is the only intention that I have, is to just continue to keep that focus on their story and find clarity to it and spotlight it. And something that I'm going to start doing, and I talked about this a little bit on my Substack this morning, is I'm going to continue on what was done at the Trump Epstein reading room, where they did the filibuster. They were reading the files. I am going to continue on my Substack reading the files so that people know what's in them. I'm going to find the ones that are more substantive and kind of easier to understand. They read a little bit better. I know when I was there, I just opened the book and I was reading FOIA requests, which wasn't very, I felt like wasn't very helpful, but I read them. But I'm gonna pick specific things in the files that are very readable and I think very visual. I will always include if there are triggers, but I think it may be a way to help people better understand what we're dealing with. And then potentially connect up with people like Xander Schultz and Miles Taylor and some of the people doing the bookmobile and the folks from the actual Trump Epstein reading room who are now taking it on the road to DC, and then getting all of you guys to help out, and you guys can start reading files and start sharing the same way as we were digging. That this can be sort of a crowdsourced effort to get more eyes and ears on these files so that we know what's in them.
I love that. It's such a great idea, and I'll simulcast that tonight. And Ellie, support for you on that. It's the reading of those files was very powerful, I thought, for everybody involved, because we didn't actually. It was almost like a meditation in some ways. We had to stop and really read the words, and really focus on their meaning in so many ways. And a lot of the meaning might have been lost on some people, but the totality of it all was so impactful on everybody. And the fact that so many people showed up and so many people were involved is an indication of how much interest there is. And the Save America movement did a great job in putting that together, really, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I'm glad you're carrying on that torch. So it's 9:00 tonight. You're doing the Diary of the Unknown Survivor.
Yes, I will be reading the Diary of the Unknown Survivor. There are multiple. I'm going to do the first one, which is the longest. But I'm gonna set it up so everybody can actually see it, because I think looking at it while you read it is really important, because it's a child's journal, and it has cut and pasted pieces of magazines and photographs and the way we all wrote in our journals when we were in high school. And I think that's really important to see and not just hear. So I got to get that all set up and figured out. But yeah, that will be tonight at 9:00 Eastern. I
can't wait to see that and to be a part of that. And also we'll rebroadcast it here for Narativ viewers. And everyone should check out your new post about Howard Lutnick that's currently on the Panicked Writer. It's Ellie Leonard's incredible Substack. And you showed it there, but there's also, you include, I think, the whole podcast with Lutnick. So everyone can hear it for themselves.
And his first testimony with the Senate. I forget which group it is. Anyway, he did one in February as well, where he went in front of the Senate and was asked questions. So I included that as well.
Oh, he says he couldn't remember or whatever. Well, he said he finally could remember. I don't remember which one it was. He flip-flopped so many times. It's incredible. Ellie, thanks again for being here. It's so nice to catch up with you, and great work on all the stuff. I'm really excited about your reading tonight. People should subscribe to Ellie, but you probably all already are. So if you haven't, you know how to do that. Just click on the button above here. And I'll be back at 3:00 with Dean, and Scott will be joining us. Scott McFarlane will be joining us. So there'll be more Bondi coverage there on the 5 Stack on Friday. Finally, it's Friday. I can't believe it's Fridays. Do you notice the weekdays anymore? My weekdays and weekends they merge together, and it's sort of, you just don't know. But today is a Friday, and it feels like a Friday. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. But we'll see you again at 3:00. And thanks very much, Ellie.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye, everybody. Bye.